Welcome back. All right, so about a week ago now, I think it was, I got this, and I meant to do videos right away. Here we are, the first video now, and I'm going to do other videos from a fantasy perspective, and about predictions and all of this wonderful stuff too. And so today I want to look at players who have increased their points per game. This is points per game, not overall points. This is their production rate. Points per game from 2018-2019 to 2019-2020, and then they increase their points production again in 2020-2021. Again, that's points per game, not overall points. Because points per game can kind of tell you who's trending in the right direction. Sometimes a player might have an injury-shortened season, and yes, that can mean that the numbers are skewed in their favor sometimes, and sometimes it means that they slip under the radar when you get to picking out a fantasy team. So 15 at the bottom will be the one that's improved the least, in that their points per game has improved the least to the one that's improved the absolute most. So starting off at 15, we're going with a Tampa Bay Lightning team player here who has had, he's been on a pretty good line. Andre Palat has gone from 0.53 points per game 2 years ago to 0.59. And this past year, that goes up to 0.84, a difference of 0.31 from 2 years ago until now. So he's scoring, 0.3 of a point per game more than he was a couple seasons ago. That, as long as he's on a top line, that'll continue. As long as he's on the top two lines, that should continue. The question then becomes, is 0.84 as high as it gets, or can Palat go higher than that? So that's the question mark with Andre Palat. It's one that he's going to answer this year. And again, if you're picking in your pool, do you think, well, he overachieved last year, maybe he falls back, or do you look and say, you know what, he's still going to be on a scoring line. I like that production. I think he stays there. So again, not predicting the future on this, just looking at where we're at and saying, all right, these guys have done pretty well for improving. Number 14. The first of two Vegas Golden Knights on this list, Shea Theodore. Going from 0.47 2 years ago to 0.65, where there was a lot of talk about, hey, this guy's going to win a Norris at some point. And then this past year, he actually goes up to 0.79, which means his overall improvement is 0.32 points per game. But when Pietrangelo got there, it felt like he kind of overshadowed a lot of the rest of the defense, including Theodore. I think that his total keeps going up. I think 0.79, I think that's a number that he can get past this year. I think 0.80 and higher is highly likely for Theodore. And he's an excellent young defenseman, and he may very well have a Norris in his future. It's just interesting to me that when Pietrangelo gets there, it feels like that's part of what quiets down some of that talk. But we'll see. Number 13, with a remarkably similar number to Theodore. We're going with a Columbus Blue Jacket on this one. So, Oliver Bjorkstrand, 0.47 points per game 2 years ago. A year ago, 0.73. And this past season, 0.79. So he's gone up by the exact same amount as Shea Theodore. But with Bjorkstrand, the question mark becomes, is Bjorkstrand going to continue to show improvement? Is his points total going to stay the same? Or do you believe that Columbus is going to go through a really rough year, and could that negatively impact Bjorkstrand's numbers? Or conversely, maybe it's a bad year for them, but he gets all the ice time, so his numbers actually keep going up. So that's the question with Columbus and with Bjorkstrand. I think of the three on the board so far, Palat, 50-50 on him going up. Theodore probably does. Bjorkstrand, we'll see. Again, I stay out of it for the most part, but we'll see. Number 12. Another defenseman on the board who has started generating a lot of buzz. Samuel Girard, who's gone from 0.33 2 years ago. The year after that, he goes up to 0.49. And the season that we finished recently, he's up to 0.67. So he's improved by 0.34 points per game. And I think Girard, young defenseman, I think that improvement's going to continue. Colorado has a lot of pressure on them this year, but they also have an excellent roster, and Girard should get a lot of special teams time. He should absolutely improve on that 0.67, I would think. Number 11. Going to Winnipeg on this one. Nick Ehlers. Now, with Nick Ehlers, I've been on his bandwagon for a while. 2 years ago, his points per game, .60. The following season, .82. This year that we just finished not that long back, .98, meaning he's gone up by .38 points per game. Ehlers is fantastic. I honestly didn't see the hype when he signed that long-term extension with Winnipeg. I get it now. He's one of those players that the more you watch him, the more you like him. And it's not just the points, but the points are pretty good. So the question then becomes, as good as Ehlers is .98, is that going to be as high as his points per game gets? Does he drop back down? And I could see an argument either way on that. So Ehlers, I do hope he continues to, make that progression step by step. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how he and the Jets do this year. Number 10, a former Winnipeg Jet who is now in Columbus, Jack Roslovic. For Roslovic, it's pretty obvious that he likes it in Columbus. So his numbers in Winnipeg from .31 to .41. He goes to Columbus, .71 points per game. So he's gone up by 0.4 of a point per game in Columbus. I would be very surprised if he's not able to maintain that level of production. But we'll see, because again, it does happen where a guy will have this kind of a season and then he regresses a bit. Maybe Roslovic does go down to 40 points over 80 games, rather than the 7/10 of a point, or 7/10 of a point per game that he was on last year, or 71/100. You guys know what I'm getting at. So yeah, Roslovic, I hope he maintains that level of production. I'd love to see it go up. But Columbus, to me, it's easy to pick Columbus and say, well, they're going to fall apart. But we did that a couple years ago. So there's a part of me saying, yeah, they were supposed to fall apart a couple years back, and they didn't. So, right? Number 9, Detroit Red Wing on this list here. Now, Robby Fabbri does have problems staying healthy. Yes, absolutely. And when it was .19 points per game, he was in St. Louis, and it didn't look good. But the following season, .52, his points per game actually went up this year to .60. So while it may feel like Fabbri didn't have as solid of a season this past year for Detroit as he did the year before, in reality, his production was better. So Fabbri taking that step, but again, with Fabbri, you're always going to have that concern about him getting injured. So Fabbri, I'm on the fence as to whether or not I think his points per game is all that important, because you're going to have injury issues. It's the Evgeny Malkin situation. Yeah, you can pick up Malkin, and you're going to get your points, but you're also going to get your injuries. So Fabbri is kind of the same thing. Number 8, a Vancouver Canuck who hasn't played a game for the Canucks yet, Conor Garland. In Arizona, his numbers were definitely going up. So then your question becomes, so he went from .38 to .57, and then this past year, .80. So he's gone up by 0.42 points per game. So can Garland score higher than that in Vancouver? And Canuck fans will likely say yes. And I'm leaning towards yes. But does he get less opportunities in Vancouver than he got in Arizona? Does he go through a period of learning Vancouver's system where maybe he doesn't score as much and it drags down his overall number at the end of the year? It'll be interesting to see. The Canucks are definitely banking on him being closer to the 0.8 than the 0.57, and above 0.8 points per game would be nice. That's where Vancouver would like to see him go. So Garland has gotten better every year. Number 7, a former Canuck. I like how this list worked out, to be honest. Tyler Toffoli, who, of course, 2 years ago, while he's in LA, .41. The following season, between LA and Vancouver, he goes up to .65. And then the season that we just finished not that long back, .85. So he's gone up by 0.44 points per game. I think Toffoli topped out last year. I can't see him doing it again. But again, that was his first year in Montreal. Maybe that's what we'll see from him in Montreal. Maybe it is the absolute perfect fit. Something that, and I've said this before, I don't know that he scores like this in Vancouver if he'd stayed. I think it was a perfect situation for him in Montreal. Everything fell his way. And it helped that he scored all those goals and points against the Canucks too during the regular season, right? So the playoffs kind of showed Toffoli drop in his scoring. I don't know whether or not he can hit .85 again. That may be a career year when we look back. Number 6, another Vegas player here. Actually, no, I'm gonna actually change that. Number 6, Kyrou, and I'll explain why. I'm changing this. These guys are tied points wise, or they're tied in this column, but I'll explain it. So Jordan Kyrou, St. Louis, goes from .19 to .32. The year that we just finished, again, .64. So he's going up now. This is because his ice time's gone up, right? So the overall number has gone up by .45. This is his progression. They wanted Thomas to progress like this too. Thomas did not make the progression. Kyrou has. Kyrou, they're going to expect more out of him this year than the .64 points per game that he got last year. With the changes in St. Louis, I think there's a good opportunity there for Kyrou to get more special teams time, to get more points, get more goals. And he has the talent, he has the ability. So I have very little doubt that Jordan Kyrou is going to make that next step. Next on the board. Now, I'm putting the R because it's Ryan Strome. There's 2 Stromes. But I don't think anybody would expect Dylan Strome's numbers to have gotten better every year. So for Ryan Strome, he goes from .43 2 years ago in points per game to .84. And honestly, it's kind of surprising to me that his numbers went up to .88 points per game. And you can say, well, you know, playing with Panarin helps. And it does. Absolutely does help to have really good line mates. But Strome's played really well in his own right. So his numbers have gone up by .45 points per game. He made a small improvement from 2019, 2020 to 2020, 2021, right? So it's more of a gradual improvement. .88 might be the highest it gets. That's not bad. I've got a video coming up on point per game players, reliable point per game players over the last 3 years. And I decided for points per game, I would have .89 as the bottom line. I didn't want to just do 1.00 like the, you know, actual points per game, because .89 I think is, in this era, pretty indicative of a guy who's scoring really well. .88 is excellent. So we'll see if that's as high as Strome gets, or if he gets even higher this year. And who knows? I think the Rangers are going to improve. I think they're going to score a lot. I think the Rangers could very well be an explosive offensive team this year. Number 4. So now this is the player that I had listed at 6. I forgot to change the number on the sheet here. So, but it's Pacioretty, who goes from .61 2 years ago in points per game to .93. And this year, 1.06 points per game. So he also goes up by .45. So the reason that I organized them this way is Kyrou is currently .64, Strome .88, Pacioretty 1.06. And when I see this, I think that can't be sustainable, right? Pacioretty can't be above a point a game again next year, and yet he could. Vegas is going to be a team that scores a bunch of goals. The question with Vegas is going to be, so with the loss of Marc-Andre Fleury, does that hurt them in the overall standing? Pacioretty, though, this is a fantastic improvement for him. He clearly likes it in Vegas more than he did in Montreal, and it's been a good story. Of course, the playoffs, where you want to see your Stanley Cup ring, they haven't had that yet, but they're always in the running. So as long as you're always in the running, you have a chance. It's there. Number 3. Now we're getting into a guy who's really brought up his numbers. Andre Burakovsky. And I can still remember when, you know, .33 points per game, there was some frustration with his not producing the way he wanted. Following season, .78. And then .83. He's definitely benefited from being a member of the Colorado Avalanche, and he's gone up by an even half a point per game over the last 2 years. So Burakovsky's become an excellent producer, and would I be surprised to see him score above the .83 points per game mark? Not really. No. I think he's an underrated forward. And when I was getting into Colorado and talking about them being contenders, I would see other fans talking about, well, Burakovsky's not that good. And he's thinking, okay, so may not be watching a lot of Colorado because Burakovsky, pretty good top 6 forward for Colorado. Number 2, another Vegas. So there's 3 Vegas. So good job wearing the Vegas jersey here. And this is an interesting one because honestly, while I like Chandler Stephenson, shouldn't be a top line center, and he's been a top line center for Vegas. So his points per game, 0.17 2 years ago, goes up to 0.40. Just fix that. Oh, it's just going to look like a 1. 0.40 a year ago. And this past season, he's now up to 0.69, meaning he's gone up by 0.52. But, again, Chandler Stephenson is playing in a role that I'm not sure ideally you'd want him in as a Vegas fan. I think you want him as your second or maybe even third line center, ideally. They don't really have that big name down the middle. And going into the offseason, we were like, okay, and this is why they get tied to Eichel, right? This is why every time Eichel's name comes up, people are like, and Vegas is going to try to get him. Even though there's no cap space for that $10 million, Vegas doesn't care about cap space. They don't care. So I think Stevenson's numbers being this high, they're dependent on him staying on a top line. And I'm not sure that that'll necessarily be the case. If Eichel goes anywhere, Vegas might work, but Vegas needs to trade money then back to Buffalo. Buffalo likely isn't just going to hand Eichel off. They're not going to hand him off to a team that might very well win a Stanley Cup with him as the first line center without wanting some extra stuff back. So we'll see if that happens and what that does to Stevenson's production when/if Vegas gets that center spot figured out. And number 1, and had an amazing season, but Roope Hintz, if he can stay healthy, that's the thing that Dallas fans this year are looking forward to. He goes from 0.38 2 years ago to 0.55 last year. And this past season, 1.05 points per game, an improvement of 0.67 points per game. If Roope Hintz is a point per game guy, if he can stay healthy, Dallas should return to the playoffs. Absolutely should return to the playoffs. I really think 5 teams in the Central make it, 3 in the Pacific, and that Dallas could be one of those wild cards. And just think about it. If Dallas is that second wild card and they, go over and play a Pacific team, and if they end up playing Vegas, that could be a fun first-round matchup, right? Roope Hintz is a huge part of the future and the present of the Dallas Stars, a team that's a little long in the tooth on certain parts of the roster, but with a guy like Hintz, they've got their fingers crossed that things are going to go his way. And, I'm really hoping for a healthy season because that 1.05 points per game is excellent. The interesting thing, too, is he produced at that level when he was hurt. So he was out of the lineup a lot, and when he was in the lineup, he was fantastic, but he still wasn't 100%. I would love to see Roope Hintz at 100%. We'll see what happens. So there you go. Which of these players do you think maintains this? Which ones do you think increase their points per game this coming season, and which ones fall back? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.